if you're wondering if you're in a codependent relationship, it may be that you're in a relationship with someone who meets those classical requirements, right? The original criteria for being a codependent was that this was a person who was in a relationship with an alcoholic or an addict, another kind of addict, someone who is dependent on a substance, or maybe it's someone who has a chronic illness or is narcissistic. So if you're in a relationship with someone who is any of those three, right, has an addiction, is narcissistic, or has a chronic illness, it's likely that you may be developing some degree of codependency. But it's also common if you're in a relationship with someone who is already codependent. Maybe they come from a family with one of those three in their background, or by some other twist of fate, maybe literally due to a religious belief system, they might have developed codependency elsewhere. And so let's look at some of the signs that you're in a codependent relationship. Number one, you and your partner play giver and taker roles. So rather than having a healthy interdependency where those roles are constantly being interchanged, in your relationship you find that for the majority of the time, someone is always giving and the other is always taking. Now I want to put a caveat here, because if you're in a narcissistic relationship, I wouldn't recommend rushing to try to identify who the giver or the taker is. Instead, move on to the next identifiers, because it's very likely that, for lack of a better term, your brain is scrambled. If you've been subjected to years of manipulation, gaslighting, triangulation, like the host of the entire narcissistic playbook, you're not going to be able to see clearly who is playing those roles. Victims of narcissistic abuse are often so gaslit, and they go through so much projection and blame shifting that they actually come to believe that up is down and down is sideways. And I know this from experience. It's very common for narcissists to assert that they're the only ones giving in the relationship. That word only, you'll hear that a lot. Or that you are taking too much from them. And when you buy into this story, when you've been shamed enough and guilt-tripped enough to buy into this story, you may not be able to accurately see that actually you're the one that is being robbed blind. Even if it's not financially, it could be in your energy, in your time, your compassion, your spirit, your sense of vitality, sometimes even your general will to live. Number two, like I said before, if you are in a relationship where your partner is suffering from an addiction or chronic illness, it's very common to develop codependency. This is because these situations create a compulsion within you to help. It feels like you can't not help or protect this person. Next, you tend to feel responsible for your partner. You feel responsible for their feelings, their thoughts, and their overall well-being. Next, boundaries are non-existent or very wobbly. Maybe you say them, but you don't uphold them, and your partner kind of knows that your boundaries, they're not really real. So you might struggle to say no because you feel that compulsion to help, or you may feel that you can't even say no, or you're going to be punished, or there's going to be this big conflict over something as small as like, no, I can't cook dinner tonight, or I can't do this. Something small becomes a big thing, and so you feel like you can't even state a boundary to begin with. Next, you experience a lot of conflict avoidance. Conflict isn't actually resolved in the relationship, and so you may feel that it's better to just keep quiet instead of upsetting them. Alternatively, some codependents may find themselves even provoking their partner on other issues, like things not related to what you care about most, simply because you can't really get your true needs met. And so you have some pent-up anger that you're not addressing. And so you're kind of poking the fire to try to get a rise out of them. Next, you feel a lot of guilt if you take time for yourself to do self-care, to explore your interests, your hobbies, or outside relationships. It may not even be that your partner is explicitly guilting you. They may actually guilt trip in more passive aggressive ways, or this may be an internalized pattern from your past relationships or upbringing that you're bringing into this relationship where you've always kind of felt guilty for taking care of yourself. Next, you are experiencing a lot of self-abandonment. You often forget about your own interest, or maybe you find that you don't believe in yourself anymore because of something your partner said. So in little ways and big ways, you find this trend starting to happen where you're abandoning yourself, your own inner knowing, your own trust in your own discernment more and more in your own decisions. Next, you're never really sure your partner really loves you, or your partner is constantly questioning or testing your love. Another sign is that you find yourself often in a push-pull dynamic. This is really common if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, or if you or your partner has insecure attachment styles. And we will get into attachment theory in another video in about 2 to 3 weeks. So be sure to subscribe below and also hit like if you would like to see that video. Next, you may be feeling a general loss of self and individuality. So you may also be feeling enmeshed in your partner. There's no clear delineation between you and your partner, kind of absorbing into a two-headed baby. Are we going with that? That metaphor? I guess we are. Next, you might be experiencing intense fears of abandonment or controlling behavior from either you or your partner. This can be overtly controlling or even covertly controlling, also present in people pleasing. You may be in a codependent relationship if you're noticing that sex is becoming a tool for manipulation. For example, it's used to create closeness or to people please. For example, you may be having sex to manufacture closeness because you sneakily know that it's going to draw that person closer, especially if they've been, threatening to leave or what have you. And so it becomes a form of manipulation or to people please, right? Because your partner is being very demanding on this topic. Another sign, and this one can go under the radar because we can think it's an us issue and not recognize that it's how we're approaching the relationship or the components of the relationship. And that is feeling unworthy and feeling a low self-esteem. You may also notice that you struggle to feel happy on your own. You need something outside of yourself in order to feel happy, or you may delay feeling happy until you feel everyone else is taken care of. And so when we're considering are we or are we not in a codependent relationship, what it comes down to at the end of the day is, am I codependent or not? Like I said, codependency is a reaction to another person's behavior. It's a pattern that can develop in reaction in response to experiencing something abnormal, like, addiction in your family or chronic illness or narcissism or a mental disorder that puts you in the position of being the giver, right? But at the end of the day, you are the person that is reacting. And so let's look at some of those reactions that you could be having and actually showing you that you are, in fact, a codependent.